They talk about change, about rebranding, about not being the stupid party. The GOP finally had their chance to prove it. Here comes Senator Marco Rubio with the Republican response. He's been called the GOP savior, the new Reagan, and the anti-Mitt Romney. The anti-Romney? Really?
Rising taxes will not grow jobs.
Raising taxes won't create private sector jobs.
Risking your life savings to start a business.
People can risk their own money to open a business.
The president invested taxpayer money, your money, in green companies, billions of taxpayer dollars on investments like Solyndra.
Wasting more taxpayer money on so-called clean energy companies like Solyndra.
The president thinks more government is the answer. It is not.
More government isn't going to help you get ahead. It's going to hold you back.
Good Democrats love America just like good Republicans love America.
I know that both Republicans and Democrats love America.
I'll give you that last part, but the rest, is that the idea of change? Let's bring in Abby Huntsman and Joe Madison. Thank you both for coming on.
In the building.
Abby, let's start with Rubio's speech. How was it for new and improved?
You know, the fairy tale of Marco Rubio did not end so happily ever after, right? I mean, at the same time, though, you have to feel for the guy who's scrutinized as if he's a presidential candidate 4 years before the election. And he felt that pressure. The stakes were so high, and it was clear in his delivery that he was nervous, as he should have been. But, you know, it's frustrating. He has such a beautiful story to tell. You know, his parents came from Cuba. He took on college loans. But he doesn't have a policy to defend that beautiful story. You know, in the same sentence,
he goes into policies against it.
Right. In that same sentence, he'll say, I also hate government. And it's hard to take it seriously.
Yeah, but the reason he's being scrutinized as a presidential candidate, one, he's being floated as that. Two, you undercover Time magazine as the savior of the GOP, and you're doing a response to the president of the United States. They may want to start scrutinizing.
Right, but what does the savior of the Republican Party mean? It means you're going to save the party. It means you're going to bring something different to the table.
Right.
I'm pretty sure Paul Ryan wrote at least half of this speech. It was the same speech that we heard on the 2012 campaign trail with Paul and Romney. So this was nothing new. It's frustrating for Republicans because it was almost like an empty suit.
You know, Joe, as Abby's right, you expect something to be brought new to the table, not you just getting a bottle of water off the table.
Yeah, right. Well, you have to also understand, and I'm not feeling sorry for a guy who would pull up the ladder, particularly after he climbed the ladder of government support, as she pointed out. He talked about and passionately how he used student loans, but yet he represents a party that wants to do what? Cut student loans. He also talked passionately about how Medicare was extremely important to his family. What does he do? He supports a party that, in fact, wants to cut Medicare. He supports a party that, in fact, wouldn't even stand up to support gun control. I mean, so I'm not feeling any pity for him. And I know he said, for example, that God has a way of reminding us how he's human. God also has a way of saying, I don't like ugly. And it's ugly when you use the very thing that helped you to get where you are today, and then you pull up the ladder for folks underneath. Can you imagine being opposed to a $1.25, $1.75 raise?
Well, no, it's true,
people?
Joe. My mother used to say God don't like no ugly, and he ain't too crazy about pretty either. But when you look at Abby, when you look at the fact that last night he talked about middle-class ties. Watch this.
Mr. President, I still live in the same working-class neighborhood I grew up in. My neighbors aren't millionaires. When I finished school, I owed over $100,000 in student loans, a debt I paid off just a few months ago. One of these programs is Medicare. It's especially important to me. It provided my father the care he needed to battle cancer. It pays for the care my mother receives right now. I would never support any changes to Medicare that would hurt seniors like my mother.
Now, that's a moving part of his speech. But then look at his record. Right. Not just the record of his party, his record, Abby. He signed the Norquist Pledge never to raise taxes. Marco Rubio. He blocked an effort to freeze student loan rates. He did. Marco Rubio. And he said in 2011, Rubio, that Medicare has, quote, weakened us as a people. So with all of that passion last night, his record personally, not just his party, is exactly the opposite of that.
I think the word you're looking for is hypocritical here, right?
Yeah, I think
hypocritical is the perfect word here. And as I said before, it is this beautiful story that is so relatable to so many Americans. People hear a story, and that's why I think Republican Party calls him the savior of the party, because they want him to be. He represents someone that represents so many Americans. So the problem is, as I said, he doesn't have the policies to defend that. So it's very difficult. It's hypocritical. It's hard to watch.
Joe, I have to ask you about this one. A lot of people talking about Ted Nugent coming to the speech. A Rhode Island congressman who was paralyzed in a firearms accident, paralyzed now. He criticized Nugent's invitation to the State of the Union. Nugent was asked by an NBC reporter about it. Listen to what Nugent said.
He lied, claiming that somehow I didn't feel sorry for the victims of violent crime.
Is that an appropriate thing to say about a sitting member of Congress in a wheelchair?
Genuine fecal material instead of brain matter to actually continue such a vicious, hateful lie.
Now, this is Nugent. Fine, he is who he is. What was so amazing to me is none of the Republican leadership, none of the GOP leadership had the courage to stand up and denounce his presence there. Fine, you get one obscure congressman who wanted to get in the papers who invited him. But where was the leadership? How many times have we seen Democrats have to criticize and question people that are bizarre doing things on the other side? Not one of the GOP leadership stood up and said Nugent should not have been in the chamber tonight.
Yeah, I talked to Reverend Cleaver, Congressman Cleaver, and he pointed that out and that the Congressional Black Caucus was going to point it out. But let me say this in closing. If there's anybody that knows about fecal matter, it's somebody who poops in his pants and walks around with it to keep from being drafted. So, you know, you consider the source. And for a man to sit up and say he knows Rosa Parks, excuse me, Reverend, you know Rosa Parks, I know Rosa Parks, and I'll say it straight to Ted Nugent's face. He is no Rosa Parks.
Well, I don't think you could argue.
I don't think anyone could argue that the comments he has made have been absolutely disgusting, but we also have to remember that we see this on both sides. We see extremes on Republican and the Democratic side. This is what makes a democracy.
But they don't get invited to the State of the Union by a congressman.
No, I completely agree. Yeah. But I love the word you use. I love courage. You know, and I think that's exactly what was missing in Marco Rubio's speech last night. The courage to bring something different to the table, the courage to lead, the courage to actually be that quote-unquote savior of the party. That wasn't there last night.
I'm going to have to leave it there, Abby Huntsman and Joe Madison. Thank you for your time. Still ahead, the emotional moment that could redefine the gun debate and make America a safer place. But first, music and media mogul, entrepreneur, activist, my main man, the godfather of hip-hop, my main man, Russell Simmons is here. We're going to talk about fairness, voting, guns, and more. Stay with us.